Welcome to the podcast of the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales. And it's a cold, frosty December morning, but it's beautiful and bright, and it promises to be a really lovely day. And I'm at Coed, Maidie, Goddard Woodland Nature Reserve in Ceredigion, but it's right on the border with Pembrokeshire, so it's not far from the Welsh Wildlife Centre. And I'm meeting today a large group of volunteers and a couple of staff from three counties actually, Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion and Carmarthenshire, and we're going to be doing some wood clearance in quite a dense little woodland on the edge of one of the meadows where a lot of the wood has grown up at the same time, so it's quite spindly and tall, so they're going to be clearing some of the wood back in order to improve the structure of the woodland.
The worst way, but the leaves standing wood, but perhaps it's a bit really
The bark stripped off that one.
Yeah. It's actually
very
been stripped. The bark just falling off. Looks like it's been stripped.
Well, that's not deer.
No.
If it is, we've got some seriously genetically modified ones.
Anyway, they don't go for willows, we know that.
There's lots of little hedgehogs hiding under these piles.
I think so.
It'd be nice to think. I haven't seen a hedgehog not a live one, for a long time.
I've not even been seeing dead ones.
No, not many.
One to Phosphine on the road.
Okie dokie. Well, I'm sure you've all been here before. You've pretty much all done this job before. So I'll just do a brief explanation. Basically, we're continuing from where we finished last year. We're thinning the woodland. If you can concentrate on taking out any dead stuff first, because a lot of the dead stuff is affecting how the live stuff is growing, and there is a lot of it in here. Watch out for stuff falling on your head from the tops, because there's quite a lot of stuff up there as well. And then basically thinning anything that looks unhealthy, and then anything that's healthy that is crowded. So leave any oaks in, any beeches, take some willow out. There's quite a lot of ash in here as well. If it's nice and straight and looks good, leave it. If it's horrible looking, then take it out, basically, because the whole woodland is very overcrowded, very dark, although not so dark in the winter because no leaves, but when you walk in here in the summer, very dark. If we can pile it in piles as we normally do, but if you can leave any sort of 4 foot and straight bits that are anything from sort of a couple of centimetres up to about that big in a separate pile for the path, because as you can see we've got a bit more path work to do. So if you can put them in separate piles, that would help. And I think that's about it. Be careful because it will get slippy as it thaws out a bit. Don't get cold. Yeah. Don't work too close to each other so that you're dropping stuff on people's heads, please.
I'm not sure. I think there is tag, see what happens.
Okay. The sun's coming down somewhere.
And it's not coming as well.
So I'm with Jeff Powell,
That's
who's
right.
been volunteering with the Trust. Am I right in saying it's 25 years?
At
Oh,
least,
okay.
more than that, I think.
Okay. Do you know this reserve fairly well? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, what's been your experience? What sort of different things do you find yourself doing with the Trust?
With the Trust generally, everything, gates and fences and bridges and what we're doing here, thinning, scrub removal, some surveys as well, marsh artillery, butterfly surveys, orchid surveys, deer damage surveys on this reserve. What else? We do these causeways, and No, I can't think of anything else.
Plenty to be getting on
Yes,
with.
yes.
And you volunteer between not just one county, do you?
That's right. I help Emily in Ceredigion and Lizzie in Carmarthenshire.
Yeah, so what motivates you to do so
What
much?
motivates me?
Yeah.
It's become a
Glutton
habit.
of punishment.
No, I just thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, I hope that it's doing something useful for something I really care about, which is wildlife. And I like the people, the places, and so yeah.
You get to go to some really stunning
Yes, exactly.
places.
That's the other thing. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And probably get to see things that, unless you know what you're looking for, you wouldn't get a chance to
Yes.
see
Yeah,
or
that's
appreciate.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, and go out with experts. And
Well, that's true. I mean, I know very little about wildlife, actually. It's surprising. So I'm not really a natural historian, but I'm an environmentalist more,
Yeah.
really, you know. And so, yeah, I hope I'm doing some useful things.
you appreciate the value of what's around you.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll go.
Is that the silver birch as well?
Yeah, I think I'll down the birch one. The weight and the branch are going off it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pull it back. Pull it back.
Yeah, it might be easier. I haven't finished cutting it yet.
Oh.
I think I have to roll it that way, but
It's not easy, is it, when they're all so
Yeah, they're just tangled up right at the
Yeah.
top. I think they're sort of clear and then they just get caught, but not too much. Yeah, afternoon. It's quitting time. Let's keep on going. So we were going to walk up the hill.
take it the whole way. You want me to say something?
I'm going to ask
Give me a minute.
Not your first thought.
No. I just sound like a nuisance phone call at the moment. I'm composed.
Okay, I'm with Lizzie Wilberforce, and we're in, well, name the wood, Lizzie.
It's Coed Maidie Goddard.
It's a very long name, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The name comes from the lady whose legacy made the purchase of the land possible.
Lovely. Okay, so that's a really nice sort of in memoriam. memory
Yes,
of her.
absolutely, yeah.
Fabulous. And we were saying about this, the willow being about the same sort of height. Why is that? Is that because it's planted, or is it just naturally regenerated at the same time?
Yeah, it's natural regeneration, so it's secondary woodland. A lot of the woods here had been conifer plantation, so this is mostly natural regeneration that followed the felling, which is good because it's all very local provenance. I mean, it's all seed that's come from the local area. So,
Yeah.
but that's why it's so even aged, because it was clear felled all at the same time.
Right, so it's all grown back at the same time.
Yes, right.
So what is the purpose of what we're doing here today then?
Right, well, it's all, as we've just been discussing, it's all grown back at the same time and not planted. So it's come back quite dense. The growth is quite dense. There's a lot of ash and a lot of willow. It's pretty tall and pretty crowded, so the trees are quite tall and skinny. So what we really want to do is sort of thin the woodland out. It gets a bit more light down to the ground floor, which in summer doesn't see a lot of light in here. There's a lot of ivy on the ground.
Yes.
But also, if we can thin it, then we can pick the best of the trees and give them a bit more space in the canopy, so their canopy can broaden. It really gives those trees the best advantage for the future then, so they are the sort of future veteran trees. I mean, these are only sort of 20 years old, a lot of them now, so they're young, but yeah, you can see they're so crowded, they've all etiolated, they've gone tall and skinny. So if we thin them out now, then they can develop into sound trees, and it's those old trees that contain all the really good features for wildlife, so that's what we're trying to create, is the best diversity for the future.
So basically this is very long-term planning.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And we'll thin it now, but we'll have to come back in future years and thin again. So it's a continuous process then. I mean, it's a lot of the time when you see thinning, it's done for commercial woodland, because if you thin your trees well, you get the straightest timber, and obviously we're not interested in that, but we are interested in prolonging the life of the best trees.
Yeah, so I mean, the way you're thinning now, it's not like coppicing, is it? Are you doing it quite differently to coppicing? You don't want to have regrowth, I assume.
Well, I
Do you
mean,
want
from our point of view, that's fine because then you get a diverse age structure. Again, I mean, all these trees are the same age. There is some regen happening underneath anyway, but you can see there's a couple of young ash near where we're standing. And the young ones really aren't very healthy because the crown density is such with the unthinned woodland that they're not getting hardly any light.
Yeah.
Whereas once we've thinned it, we will get, especially the ash, shoots really well from where we've cut it. But you get a bit of a scrub layer as well because we do have deer in this woodland, and that means that there's a lot of browsing, but there's not really much scrub layer at all, so it would be nice to try and promote that a bit.
Yeah, and we've created lots of piles of brush, haven't we, here? Lots of piles of wood, so again, what's the sort of the reasoning behind that?
Again, it's multiple benefits really. I mean, from a woodland management point of view, it makes sense to pile your brush because you're going to have to come back in here again and re-thin it. You've got to be able to get around. You don't want to be tripping over brush that's just been left around. So from a sort of woodland management point of view of convenience, that's a good reason. But they're a great wildlife resource, and again, another feature of this woodland being so young is there's not a huge amount of dead wood. So by piling the dead wood like this, you're creating a new niche. Already today we can see there's been robins kind of hopping around on them, and so all sorts of wildlife will be using that, invertebrates, and there's another tree. Be creating a new niche for all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it all adds to the diversity of habitat really.
So with management like this, really, we're not really killing the trees as such. We're creating future growth and healthy future growth. Absolutely,
yes. People ask that a lot because we do seem to spend an awful lot of time cutting trees down, and I think maybe that's not what people expect, but it's actually promoting diversity. And actually, if you do cut a tree down and it does regrow and becomes multi-stemmed, that's kind of creating more biomass.
Yeah.
We're not using any of the timber that comes out of here for fuel or anything. It's all staying in here. So
it'll all rot down. You'll get fungi and
that's right. Yes, all part of the natural system.
Excellent. And with the ground floor in this wood, because you know this wood fairly well, don't you? You've been working in it for a long time. What is in this wood? Is there very much at all, or is it literally because of the previous plantations, nothing?
It's not a hugely diverse ground flora, no. It does vary a bit in the different bits of the woodland. Where we are now, it's coming into a slightly wetter area where there's more willow, and it's that bit darker again than the area further up the hill that's more ash dominated. There are some interesting things in here. There's woodruff in here, which is quite nice. It's not something I see a lot of locally. Again, because there is deer grazing in here, that keeps the flora down a little bit. But a lot of it is dominated by this ivy. Which, not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not particularly diverse.
Yeah.
But you would expect to see more things coming in with a bit more light.
Yeah. The reserve itself, Coed Maidie, it's quite diverse, isn't it? I mean, Coed suggests it's just a woodland, but there's more to it than that.
Oh, definitely, yes. It's actually a really nice reserve. I wouldn't say there's any habitats here that are really threatened. There's biodiversity action plan habitats, but nothing really, really scarce. A few species of interest, but it's a mixture of meadows and woodland. And again, the woodland's secondary woodland, most of it's not ancient woodland, so it's quite young woodland. But it's very undulating terrain as well. So it's only about 15 hectares, but it feels an awful lot larger because you can do a different sort of set of circuits around it. And because you're sort of dipping in and out of woodlands and little nooks and kind of little stream valleys, it just feels a lot bigger than it is.
Exploring.
Very much, yeah. No, it's really nice. One of the really nice things about it. It makes a nice walk. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ash in this wood, isn't there? And obviously ash is very high on the news radar at the moment, isn't it, with the ash dieback?
It is, yes. In Wales so far, as far as I'm aware, the ash dieback hasn't been recorded in any mature woodlands or sort of natural woodlands habitats, only in plantation sites. So it's not high risk for us at the moment, but obviously it's widespread across the country now, so it's quite likely to be an issue in the future, and there is quite a lot of ash on this site.
I was going to say, is this something that we'll be monitoring for then sort of next summer?
Yes, very much. I mean, we're proactively checking our sites where we've done any planting because they're obviously the high risk sites for having been brought in. We will become a lot more vigilant if we find that it's in the wild in Wales, but we are it's sort of incidental checking if you like. Obviously we've sort of, in my own van I've got one of these set of pictures that show the symptoms, so that all the volunteers that are out with me have some clue as well, so everyone can keep an eye.
Yeah.
I think it's just a question of being vigilant.
What are the symptoms and what are things people can look out for?
Well, it's the dieback of the leaves. I mean, it's called ash dieback. That's the most obvious symptom. You get these dark lesions around where the branches join as well. There's some great stuff online that helps you look up the symptoms. Yeah.
Obviously this wood, as you say, has got a lot of ash in it, so what's going to be the impact on the local wildlife here if it did come in, if it was found in our woodlands?
All the evidence from Europe shows that the mortality rate is quite high. Once it does really get into a woodland, ash are very, very susceptible to it, so you get a high rate of death of the ash trees. The impact actually in this woodland here mightn't be so bad in the sense that the woodland's quite young, so it's not like we're going to be losing a huge number of really high value specimen trees. So it would dramatically change the composition of the woodland. I think we tend to forget that. I mean, obviously it would be quite sort of catastrophic change over a short time, but we've faced that before with Dutch elm disease. And if we look at our reserve castlewood in Llandilo, that suffered massively from Dutch elm disease, but it's recovered quite well now. Some species do suffer. Ash has got its own range of sort of species of mosses, lichens and things that grow on it, so species that are associated with it will suffer, but again that was the case with Dutch elm disease, and we've got some really rare lichens that were on all the elms, and they're now persisting on the sycamore, so
they've jumped species.
And other species has become more important in their ecology locally, so it's not the end of the world. Things will recover. If you look at this site, for example, if all the ash trees died, we would have some work to do from a safety point of view, because there's a lot of standing dead wood near paths isn't good, but it also creates a different resource for more wildlife, more standing dead wood. So
it is a fungus. It's a naturally occurring thing, isn't it? I mean, it's been compounded by our activities, hasn't it? But it is something that naturally comes through.
Well, all the evidence is that this particular species has arrived in the UK naturally. There's a very, very closely related species that occurs naturally in Britain, which doesn't cause the disease that this one does. So I think there was a bit of confusion about. A lot of people thought that this fungus was already present, but it was actually this very, very closely related species that doesn't cause the same pathology in trees. But yeah, I mean, these species will keep coming in. We've got global trade and movement of materials, and the best you can do is be vigilant and stop them coming in. Like with this one, it was recorded in a few places. Once people started to look, it was popping up all over the place, and by the time that's happened, it's very, very difficult to stop it. So it just becomes an issue of management of the situation.
Yes, because it's windborne, isn't it? So it's going to spread.
That's right.
Easily.
Yes, very easy. Oh, there's nothing you can. I mean, there was some guidance coming out initially saying about washing and brushing yourself off, but these tiny ascospores that spread it, like you say, they're windborne. They're in the leaf litter. No, there's not a lot you can do. It's going to spread, but it's not the disaster that hopefully that some people make it sound. And we don't know what the level of resistance is in the UK.
Some of the ash are resistant to this.
That's right, and we don't know what that's going to be in the UK. Our environment's different to mainland Europe. I don't know enough about it, but the genetics and the diversity of the genetics of ash in the UK. We'll have to wait and see what the impact's going to be.
Because in this woodland, as you said earlier, it's all locally provenance, so it's
that's
regenerated
right.
locally. So the genetics are going to be unique.
Yeah, well, this is it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it might be that the genetics of ash across the UK are quite variable. Some are going to be more susceptible than others. I mean, that's one of the joys of having a wide variety of genetic diversity, is that it does create that resistance, as it does in all populations.
Yeah.
So,
Important to know. Okay. Thank you very much, Lizzie.
Right.
Right, I'm with Em Foot here, who's actually the reserves officer for this particular reserve, aren't you, Em?
Yes.
So how long have you looked after this particular?
4.5 years now.
Wow, is it really that long?
Yes.
Oh God, it's flown by, isn't it? Okay. So this reserve, I was talking to Lizzie, and obviously it's all quite sort of a similar age, isn't it? But what are your plans for this reserve over the next few years?
We're going to do some more thinning all the way through, because as you said, it's very dense, so we're going to thin it out a bit and possibly put some holes in it to allow some new growth to come through. A lot of the hazel's being coppiced because it's very old and it's starting to rot, so we're going to rejuvenate that. And then, as you can see, or you will have experienced as you walked in, the footpath is very muddy in places and less muddy in other places.
Yes.
This is where we've done some work with the timber that we fell when we're thinning. The straight stuff gets used in a Roman-style causeway
These
and we
great
lay it
drains.
down.
Yes. And these drains as
Dig
well.
drains along the side and across to allow any water to move away from the path, basically. And then we put a thin layer of mud and then some wood chip on the top, usually, or stones if we could get stones in here, but it's a bit far. And then it dries out. But we haven't quite got to the entrance yet, so we'll be doing a bit more of that in the near future.
Yeah, because access is really important, isn't it, to
Yeah.
for us as well as general public.
Yeah, before we did this causeway, it was sort of welly high mud, and at this time of year, there was no way you could really walk through the woodland, so it's improved it a lot. So we're doing more of that, and then hopefully there's a plan with ARC, the amphibian and reptile group, to put in some ponds and some scrapes in one of the meadows.
Okay, because yes, there's a few meadows, aren't there?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 meadows.
Okay. So you manage those meadows at the end of summer, then presumably. Them.
No, 3 of them are grazed in the summer, and there's 1 that isn't. And then we cut half of it on alternate years. It's very dense, lots of meadow sweet, and smells lovely, looks lovely, has bees in it and things, but isn't great for the castle. So we cut it half and half, and it'll be that field that has the ponds putting in it.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So with the plans with the ponds, then when are you planning on putting those in?
Well, we have to get planning permission for them, which we didn't realise, because hopefully they're going in this winter before next spring. But it depends how long planning permission takes.
So they're going to be quite big ponds, are they?
Well, any ponds that are not agricultural and are not dug by hand, because we're getting a machine in to dig them in this county. Apparently it's different in other counties, need planning permission.
Okay, and we're actually in Ceredigion at the moment, aren't
Yes.
we? But we're right on the border with Pembrokeshire, so it's really confusing.
Nathan didn't have to have planning permission for his on his reserve, but I have to have them on here. So we're hoping that the planning permission gets done in time to get the ponds dug for the spring.
Okay.
And there'll be hibernation sites for grass snakes next to them, and breeding piles of grass for them to lay eggs in and things as well.
Okay, so like compost piles that create nice walls.
And also when the pond's dug, you can put some like piles of sticks and stuff around the edge, cover it with soil, and that creates a good place for adders and things to hibernate.
Ah, brilliant. Okay.
So yeah, more than just the ponds.
Fantastic. Well, yes, I was going to say ponds bring so much more than just the amphibian type species, isn't it? Really, it's presumably
lots of dragonflies, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favourites. I know you shouldn't have favourites, but I do love seeing dragonflies around, and damselflies, of course. Yeah. Today is a joint party, isn't it? So you've got volunteers from 3 different counties here today.
Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. It